What happens when one of Britain's most fearless comedians meets one of television's most confrontational hosts in a battle that nobody saw coming? You won't believe what unfolds when Ricky Gervais sits down with Piers Morgan, and what starts as a simple conversation turns into one of the most explosive confrontations ever caught on camera. The tension erupts, words are exchanged that can never be taken back, and it all ends with a dramatic walkout that has the entire internet buzzing. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two titans clash in what might be the most uncomfortable television moment of the year. The atmosphere in the studio was already electric as Ricky Gervais made his way to the guest chair, that familiar smirk playing across his face. What nobody anticipated was how quickly things would spiral completely out of control. From the very first question, it was clear that Piers Morgan had come prepared for battle, and Gervais wasn't about to back down from anyone. The interview began innocuously enough, with Morgan attempting his usual charm offensive, but there was something different in his tone tonight. Perhaps it was the recent backlash Morgan had faced over his comments about mental health awareness, or maybe it was his desperate need to generate headlines. But whatever it was, he seemed determined to push every single button Gervais had. "Ricky, let's talk about your recent comments on social media," Morgan began, leaning forward with that predatory gleam in his eyes that regular viewers know all too well. "You've been quite vocal about certain causes lately, haven't you? Some might say you've become a bit preachy." Gervais, never one to be intimidated, simply laughed. "Preachy? That's rich coming from someone who lectures everyone about everything while having the moral compass of a broken weather vane." The studio fell silent. This wasn't the playful banter that producers had expected. This was something far more dangerous, and everyone could feel it. Morgan's face darkened, but he pressed on, clearly thinking he could regain control of the situation. "Well, that's quite the accusation. I think my viewers would disagree. I stand up for what I believe in, unlike some people who hide behind comedy when they want to make serious points." "Hide behind comedy?" Gervais's voice took on that edge that anyone familiar with his work knows means trouble is coming. "At least, when I make a joke, people know it's a joke. When you open your mouth, nobody can tell if you're being serious or if you're just desperate for attention." The tension in the room was palpable now. Camera operators exchanged glances. Producers in the control room were frantically whispering into their headsets, and the studio audience sat in stunned silence. This was supposed to be a lighthearted chat, but it was rapidly becoming something much more volatile. Morgan, clearly rattled but trying to maintain his composure, decided to go for the jugular. "Let's talk about your activism, Ricky. Animal rights, specifically. You're quite passionate about that, aren't you? Some might say obsessively so. Do you think your extreme views might be turning people off?" The word extreme hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Gervais's expression shifted completely, the humor draining from his face as he stared directly at his host. "Extreme?" Gervais repeated slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. "You think caring about animal welfare is extreme? This from someone who's spent years defending blood sports and making jokes about vegans?" Morgan sensed he'd hit a nerve and, in typical fashion, decided to twist the knife. "I'm just saying that perhaps your approach is a bit militant. You attack people online, you shame them for their lifestyle choices. Don't you think that's a bit hypocritical for someone who preaches tolerance?" The accusation of hypocrisy was clearly a step too far. Gervais sat back in his chair, and for a moment the studio was completely silent. When he finally spoke, his voice was ice cold. "Militant? Let me tell you what's militant, Piers. Militant is using your platform to spread misinformation. Militant is attacking vulnerable people for clicks. Militant is pretending to care about free speech while trying to silence anyone who disagrees with you." Morgan's face was flushing red now, his carefully constructed media persona beginning to crack under the pressure. "Now hang on just a minute." "No, you hang on," Gervais interrupted, his voice rising. "You want to talk about hypocrisy? You've spent years claiming to be a champion of women's rights while simultaneously objectifying women in your columns. You've positioned yourself as a mental health advocate while publicly mocking people's struggles. And now you have the audacity to call me extreme for actually giving a damn about something other than my own ego." The studio audience was completely silent now, some looking uncomfortable, others watching with the kind of morbid fascination usually reserved for car crashes. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a genuine confrontation between two people who clearly had deep-seated issues with each other. Morgan, realizing he was losing control of the situation but unable to back down, decided to go nuclear. At least I don't hide behind a persona, Ricky. At least I'm genuine. Your whole truth-telling act is just that, an act. You're just as manufactured as any other celebrity. You're just better at pretending you're not. The accusation struck home, and everyone in the studio could see it. Gervais's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the arms of his chair as he processed what had just been said. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before he finally responded. You know what, Piers? You're absolutely right about one thing. This is an act. This whole setup, this fake conversation, this pretend civility, it's all an act. But here's the difference between you and me. I know when to drop the act and be real. You've been performing for so long you've forgotten who you actually are underneath all that desperate need for validation. Morgan's composure was completely shattered now. His voice cracked slightly as he tried to regain control. I don't need to sit here and be lectured by someone who thinks Twitter tantrums count as social activism. Twitter tantrums? Gervais laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean like when you had a complete meltdown because people criticized your interview technique? Or when you blocked half of Twitter because they pointed out your hypocrisy? Those kinds of tantrums? The host was visibly struggling now, sweat beading on his forehead as he realized how badly this was going. But instead of backing down, he decided to make one final, devastating attack. You know what your problem is, Ricky? You've become everything you used to make fun of. You're preachy, you're sanctimonious, and you're completely out of touch. Your comedy isn't funny anymore because you're too busy trying to be some kind of moral authority. You've lost your edge, and everyone can see it. The words hit like a physical blow. Gervais sat completely still for a moment, processing what had just been said. When he finally looked up, there was something different in his eyes, not anger, but something closer to disgust. You know what? Gervais said quietly, beginning to unhook his microphone. I came here thinking we could have a conversation, maybe even a debate. But you're not interested in conversation, are you, Piers? You're just interested in creating drama for your failing show. Morgan realized too late that he had pushed too far. Ricky, come on, let's what? Let's pretend this is normal behavior. Let's pretend that ambushing guests with personal attacks is journalism? Gervais stood up, his microphone now completely detached. You want to know what's really lost its edge? This show? This whole charade where you pretend to be some kind of hard-hitting interviewer when really you're just a gossip columnist with a television contract. The studio was in complete chaos now. Producers were frantically trying to communicate with the host through his earpiece. Camera operators weren't sure whether to keep filming. And the audience sat in stunned silence as they witnessed the complete breakdown of what was supposed to be a simple celebrity interview. Morgan made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Ricky, please. Sit down. Let's discuss this like adults. Gervais paused at the edge of the set and turned back to face his host one final time. Adults? Piers, you've spent the last 20 minutes acting like a playground bully who's upset because someone finally stood up to you. This isn't journalism, it's not entertainment, and it's certainly not adult behavior. It's just sad. With that, Ricky Gervais walked off the set, leaving Piers Morgan sitting alone in his chair, visibly shaken and struggling to find words. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing the host's stunned expression as he tried to process what had just happened. The confrontation that nobody saw coming had ended with one of the most dramatic walkouts in television history, and the internet would be talking about it for days to come.